This is a re-recording of the presentation I made at Pigs Peak in the Pigs Peak Hotel on the 2nd of April this year. This was the follow-up conference to a similar one held a year ago at Pigs Peak. And it reflects on what's happened since the last conference and draws on some international examples which demonstrate how creating shared value through tourism can benefit both the hotel, businesses in the area, and communities. It's all part of responsible tourism, of using tourism to make better places to live in. I wanted to start with this slide. It's a reminder that the CEO of the Pigs Peak Hotel, and also the CFP, the CEO of TFPD, Glyn O'Leary, was one of the signatories to the 2022 Responsible Tourism Charter, which was signed on Magna Carta Island in November of 2022. That's 20 years on from the Cape Town Declaration, agreed and signed in Cape Town at an official side event of the Johannesburg World Summit on Sustainable Development. Those guidelines are still in operation in South Africa, but to be honest, other destinations have taken the lead in applying the principles of responsible tourism. When I was looking at the municipal website for Pigs Peak, I was very struck by the way you phrase your objective. And I really wanted to take this opportunity to share with you some of my thinking about how we can, by creating shared value through tourism, make lives better for local people. So the first thing to say is that tourism is a social construct. It's what we make it. And by we, I mean both the consumers and the producers. Now, the producers of tourism in Pigs Peak are obviously the hotel, where people stay overnight if they're here as a tourist. But there's a lot going on in the town, around the town, which caters for tourists, or where tourism is an additional livelihood. Now, Krippendorf, who really originated the idea of responsible tourism, made the point that when we travel, every individual, when they travel, builds up or destroys human values. We have choices about the way we travel. And he appealed for rebellious tourists and rebellious locals to change tourism for the better. Now, in my view, rebellious locals can do a lot more than rebellious tourists. We do need both. We need tourists to demand better holidays, better experiences. But we also need the locals to agree to offer a richer experience for the tourists, but to offer a coherent sense of place and of destination, which makes it attractive for tourists to stay over. And look, the hotel benefits, because if the hotel gets an additional night of stay from every guest, or perhaps an additional 2 nights if there's enough on offer in the local area, then that obviously improves their profitability and the employment conditions of the staff who work for it. Now, what the point Krippendorf made was it's not by order and prohibitions that will make progress, but rather positive experience, not the feeling of compulsion, but that of responsibility. And that's where the whole idea of responsible tourism came from. Now, basically, the businesses and the destinations, the way those businesses work together to create a sense of a destination, working with the local community to make a place an attractive place to stop over. Basically, the business and the destinations choice edit, because the decisions they make about what to offer determine what they can market and what experiences they're offering to tourists. And the experiences you offer to tourists determine the kinds of tourists who are likely to come and visit the town or come and stay at the hotel. The responsible tourism agenda is a long agenda. It ranges over greenhouse gas emissions, plastic waste, biodiversity extinction, social and economic benefits for local communities. No business can do it all. What's really required is that the businesses work with the local community, talk with the local communities to discover what are the issues that they are concerned about. And in a way, that's what today is about. This is about the local community having the opportunity through its elected representatives and through the officers of the council to talk with the hotel and other people involved in tourism. But it's equally important that when you've worked out what you're going to do as a community working with the Pigs Peak Hotel, it needs to be explained to customers, to suppliers, to other businesses, and to the community what it is that you're about. And you need to set goals, you need to measure the impact of what you're doing and report those impacts, the impacts of your efforts, to be sure that you get the credit. And the credit accrues to the hotel in terms of additional bookings, but it accrues to the community in the town through the additional economic activity, the additional livelihoods, and it helps with the marketing so that people know what it is that's special about Pigs Peak. I was privileged to be here a year ago and I really enjoyed my visit. I think there are lots of great things for tourists to do in a very rich, culturally rich, and also with industrial heritage and geology within easy reach of the hotel and of the town. I wanted just again to refer briefly to the work of Porter, who is famous on every MBA program for his thinking on cluster theory. Basically, what he was arguing with cluster theory is that successful businesses operate in situations where there's a cluster of other businesses around them. And in a way, that's exactly what a tourism destination is. It's an example of Porter's concept of cluster theory. But after the 2008 financial crisis and the collapse of so much of the financial world, Porter had a bit of a rethink about what he meant by cluster theory. And he came out with a new approach, which was about creating shared value, a community-based approach, a bottom-up approach to local economic development, benefiting communities through enabling them to engage with tourism. And I think there are great opportunities for Pigs Peak as a council, for Pigs Peak as a town and a community, but also with communities who live in the hinterland around Pigs Peak. So it's a bottom-up approach, and it requires really thinking about supplementary and alternative livelihoods which can be achieved by using the tourism dollar. But it's also about integrated rural development and bringing rural communities into the tourism value chain. Now, I said a minute or so ago that I was struck by what's on your website, and these pictures you'll be familiar with. They're all from the Pigs Peak website. Pigs Peak is effectively a cluster of economic activity and of a community that lives in the town. And as a cluster, it functions to benefit the people who live around the town. But it's obviously more than a cluster. It's people's homes. It's where people go to school. It's where they bring up their children. It's where they go to work. And it's eventually where they retire. And I was very struck by your ambition as a council to be a vibrant economic hub, transforming the region into a preferred tourist destination. And I think that's entirely possible. I think what you've got here with the hotel so adjacent to the town, almost in the town effectively, it's every opportunity to encourage tourists to stop and to enjoy the town. I've not been to it, but I'm told the rooftop bar is a real treat in the evenings to watch the sunset. There's a lot here which would be attractive to tourists who want to understand something of everyday life in Eswatini. As we know, Eswatini is a special place with a very distinct and interesting culture. It's also obviously people's home. And we need to think really hard about how the people who live here benefit from tourism to their home, to their town. You have a hell of a lot to offer to visitors as I see it. Um, you've got a dam, you've got the oldest iron ore mine at Line Cavern, you've got nature reserves, you've got the Ungwenya glass factory not that far away, you've got Bushman's painting, you've got the Kamati River Gorge, and you've got the famous falls. And I think you sit amidst an extremely interesting geological area. And it strikes me that geology ought to be part of what you offer, as is your local culture. And one of the things that's very striking about this photograph is it indicates the way in which cultures change over time. There's a lady there with a mobile phone, and there's other ladies with sunglasses. You know, clearly this is a community tradition which is evolving slowly, as all living cultures do. I was delighted to see this photograph on your website of the Bugano Festival. Now, when I showed this slide, your mouths didn't drop open, but that is the most fantastic view of an extremely attractive landscape. And I think one of the challenges for local people always is that you don't see your place in the way that a tourist sees it. I think that is just the most beautiful photograph of a fascinating and varied landscape. A landscape which I don't understand because I'm no geologist, but one which tourists would enjoy and I'm sure would like to know a little bit more about. Now, to my shame, I can't really understand this geological map of the area around your town, but clearly it is of a very considerable interest. And I think this is an area with the Barberton Ridge, the Barberton geological route, very nearby, and I gather the road is about to be improved. Surely this is something which should feature as one of the attractions of coming to visit Pikes Peak and coming to visit the Pikes Peak Hotel. So, if we employ the cluster theory, there's lots of opportunity here to create supplementary and alternative livelihoods for your community and to benefit the town. They talk about, this is Porter and Kramer, with whom Kramer's the guy with whom Porter worked on this. They talk about reconceiving the products, seeing the importance of meeting social needs, but in the process of meeting those social needs, better serving the existing markets, perhaps finding new ones, and almost certainly lowering costs through innovation. Absolutely possible to do that. Local supply, because the transport costs are lower, will be cheaper. And also the product will be fresher. So, you know, the idea of sourcing as much as possible from the local community makes absolute business sense. Redefining productivity in the value chain by improving quality, getting a bigger quantity of supply, reducing costs because you're purchasing locally, and getting the reliability of supply, again, because it's local sourcing. So what they're talking about is creating a cluster of development amongst businesses in the local area, enabling you to compete and thrive. But to do that, you need reliable local suppliers, functioning infrastructure and roads, and talent. You need a pool of talent in the town. And the hotel can contribute to that through the training programs, through the experience people have of interacting with tourists through the hotel, and hopefully moving on, those who want to, into other tourism jobs in the area. So the competitive advantage comes from building a social value proposition. It's about a business strategy. It's not about philanthropy, although philanthropy still plays its part in any socially responsible business. But this is about doing business differently. Now, one of the best clusters that I've ever had the good fortune to see is Ungwenya glass. I saw it, I think, 20 odd years ago for the first time, and I went back last year. It is an extraordinary achievement, and we recognised it for that reason in the Responsible Tourism Awards. They won in Africa, and they were global winners as well last year in 2023. They won it for being best for sourcing craft and food. Not only do they source it, they make it. And it is an extraordinary example of a business which has put around itself, made an opportunity for other businesses, developed precisely that cluster, which it benefits from, but so do all the other members of the cluster, all the other people invited to be there. It's a complex. It's a set of businesses in a place where the buses are more than pleased to stop in order to enable people to get a cup of coffee and to purchase from the many different craft producers as well as from Ngwenya Glass. You'll see here the owner of Ngwenya Glass and of course the CEO of the hotel, Glyn O'Leary, in one of the other shops in the complex at Ngwenya Glass. Really extraordinary quality being produced there by local crafters and sold in a very attractive situation adjacent to Ngwenya Glass. And when you look at this, you think New York. You think of that kind of style which you might expect to find in New York, and here it is at Ngwenya Glass with the Fair Trade Angel, which is one of the great initiatives currently taking place in Eswatini. Another example of the craft shop stuff being sold. I'm fascinated by these long-legged chickens. I think the tourists would be interested too. I don't know if it's possible for them to visit, but it's a very interestingly different kind of chicken from the sort that I'm used to seeing. I wanted just to draw your attention to Gambia is Good because this was a cluster theory approach. Gambia is Good worked with over 1,000 Gambian producers, mostly women, indirectly benefiting 5,000 people by enabling farmers to move from subsistence to commercial farming. They basically brought together groups of subsistence farmers and enabled them to work together to produce crops, the relevant crops that hotels and resorts wanted to purchase, reducing imports into the Gambia and increasing the consumption of locally grown produce, which benefited local farmers and obviously the environment. I don't know whether there's scope for doing that in Swaziland, but there very well may be. What we do know is that the demand for experiential tourism is growing rapidly at the moment. The book on the right there is The Experience Economy by Pine and Gilmore. It's a Harvard Business School publication, and they use the big coffee chain as their example of a multinational company which has sought to put something of the local experience into all of its coffee shops. The experience economy is growing. People are looking to enjoy the product. I mean, when my parents travelled, they were often just looking for sunshine, English beer and fish and chips. My generation began to be a bit more adventurous and began to look for experiences, but the current generation who are travelling are looking more and more for memorable experience, and that's driving increased tourism around the world. People are looking to engage with different cultures, with communities, and with their environments. And of course, the memories that people crave are a product of their experiences. It is precisely because of that you get these co-created memories, and that's what gives you the viral marketing. That's what encourages people to come back or to recommend to their friends that they come back and experience Eswatini or Pigs Peak in particular. I set up responsibletravel.com with Justin Francis, who was one of my students back in the early days, and one of the things he said in the classroom was that he couldn't taste the difference between fairly traded coffee and ordinary coffee. And I can't taste the difference either. I don't know anybody who can. But the point about a responsible tourism product is you can experience a difference. When you arrive at the Pigs Peak Hotel, you can feel it in the attitude of the staff, and you can see it in the kinds of products and experiences which are available to you within the hotel. I bought a wonderful carved giraffe from the man who carves in the hotel adjacent to the main thoroughfare where people go by, and there's a very attractive craft shop which again is selling local products. It feels different to be in a hotel which is firmly in and part of its community. So what's happening is we're seeing a move from value for money to people wanting experience for money. They're prepared to pay a bit more if they're going to have a great experience. And a great experience means engaging with the culture, the community, and their environment, whether that's the cultural environment or the natural environment. And they're looking for quality and depth in these experiences. That's what leads to the viral marketing, and that's the cheapest form of marketing there is. So let's just take a quick look at two bits of recent research done by Booking.com. You can see at the bottom there's a link to where you can find the latest information. I regularly post up new market evidence, so you can easily find it there if you're interested. So let's start in the top left there. 74% of people said in 2023 that they want to travel with companies who offer a more sustainable travel option. That's up by 8% in a year. This is a significant trend. I wonder every year when I see this growth how much further it can go. I mean, clearly it won't go to 100%, but it is still growing. Now, the bottom left corner there is an illustration of two countries and the percentage of those people who say that there aren't enough sustainable travel options. Now, people used to tell me that it was only the Europeans who were interested, but look at that. The Dutch are at 35%, Thailand is at 70%, the Thais are at 70%, and the average is 51%. That's just over half are saying that they want to find responsible travel options, sustainable options, and they say that there aren't enough of them available for them to choose from. The bottom right, 75% of people say they're looking for authentic experiences that are representative of the local culture. And 40% say that they don't know how or where to find tours and activities that will ensure that they give back to the local community. That is surely a market opportunity. Now, if we go to the 2025 survey is not yet completed and the results are not published, but the 2024 results are. Now, this is really interesting because they are slightly different questions, but 62% of people say that they are the best version of themselves when they travel more sustainably. They aspire to do that. 67% feel that witnessing sustainable practice while traveling inspires them to be more sustainable in their everyday life. 96% did tours or activities for authentic, local and cultural experience. 93% say they shopped at small independent stores. 93% said they planned their trip so that they could walk, cycle or take public transport. Now, they may be overstating it a bit, but those are big figures. And it's crazy to ignore market research of this kind. I wanted to draw your attention to this example. This is from the foothills of the Himalaya. And the product which has been developed there is called Village Ways. Essentially what it is staying in a guest house, a purpose-built guest house in a series of villages and walking between those guest houses with someone from the local community. And of course, along the way, you meet people, you have the opportunity to stop and talk about the agriculture, talk about their culture, understand what they're doing in their agriculture. And I think that that is entirely possible in Eswatini's countryside. Eswatini is beautiful too. This is the area of northern India in the foothills of the Himalaya where these walking tours take place, but you have beautiful landscapes too in the hills around you. If you're interested, have a look at the Village Ways website. The address is there at the top. Something somebody said, it gave me a unique chance to share in the lives of people in the villages. They were the sweetest, the most hospitable people I've ever met. This holiday has been a privilege. I suspect that if this was offered in Eswatini, you would get similar comments from the guests. And of course, when people see that kind of comment, they're very moved to want to do it. Kerala picked up the idea of village life experiences. Really, they adapted it from the South African township tours, not the big ones in the big coaches, but the small ones. Kerala Tourism had an experiment 2 years, 4 villages. The only one that worked really well was Kumarakoram. And the guy there you see on the right, Rupesh Kumar, was the person who did that. Now, he picked up 3 basic principles from the conference we ran there in 2008. He understood from Adamabar and the Gambia the importance of the producer groups selling fruit and vegetables into the local resorts and hotels. He picked up from the township tours in South Africa the idea of village life experiences, and he understood the absolute importance of avoiding dependency on tourism, that these opportunities should be additional livelihood opportunities, and that no household should become excessively dependent upon tourism in the process. This is just one of the photographs I took. There's a tourist there on the right. There's a man showing him on the left how they create these wonderful images, these religious images, just using sand and spices and things and mixing it and creating these beautiful representations of significant cultural and religious figures. You can see the gentleman on the right, the tourist, absolutely rapt in looking at this. If you get lucky, they have a go at doing it yourself. I've done this. This is making coir rope at somebody's house as part of the village life experience. This is making rope from the fibre around coconuts. I'm very proud of the rope I made, and I show it to visitors and encourage them to go and visit Kerala and make their own rope. So, let's turn now to Transfrontier Parks Destinations. The CEO of the Pigs Peak Hotel is also the CEO of Transfrontier Parks Destinations, and the way they see their role is in partnering with communities to commercialise their tourism assets. Now, that may be a lodge which has been created for them by government as part of the land restoration, but it can also just be working with local people to develop their product. In this case, it's a guided tour being led by a bushman in the desert with people looking at the wildlife and the way in which the desert functions as a place where people live. That's at Klaus Lodge. It's also about supporting small enterprise development. This is an example of, this one is at Vitsisuk, another hotel run by TFPD. They, for the first 8 lodges, they brought the furniture up from Cape Town, but they then talked with a local producer about whether he could make very similar furniture for the other lodges. And after a few trial and errors, he was able to do it. We'll come back to that in a minute. Also, buying locally for fresh fruit and vegetables, an important part of the strategy. This time, buying from local vendors in Limpopo. But again, an important way of supporting the local economy by purchasing locally. So this is Mr. Maletti. They spent 1.2 million rand with Mr. Moletti, having helped him to develop and be able to make furniture which they could then purchase and place in their hotel. This is the data which you can look at your leisure. It goes through to the beginnings of COVID. You can see the growth there in the second box, the growth in the number of employees. The first set of box headed trading. You can see the number of beds doesn't change. The occupancy percentage has gone up significantly in 2019 to 34%, and obviously it dropped off again during COVID. That was inevitable. And you can also see the local procurement, the amount of money being spent in the local economy, and you can see the community benefit in terms of staff remuneration, the rental that the company pays to the community who own the lodge, and the money that's been invested in upgrading the asset. And then you can see the regional economic benefit. Now, the reason for the big green slab at the beginning there, which is the upgrade, maintenance, and insurance of the property, is obviously in the setting up of the new business, the refurbishment of the virtually derelict hotel. There's a big expenditure, and that tails off. So the green is lower, but the staff remuneration and benefits you can see rises to the end of 2019. Then comes COVID, goes up and down a bit. Since then, it's gone up significantly again. They approached a local potter to ask whether he could make the lamps, and Gillian, Glyn's wife, said, "Well, look, if you turn that pot over, put a hole in the bottom, we can fix a light fitting to the top, and you've made the bedside lamps." So again, Tefo Makasani got economic benefit because of local purchasing of bedside lights for the bedrooms at Vitsiso. Similarly with a new micro-enterprise offering horse riding. So this is about using tourism to make better places for people to live in, as I've said. The principle is very simple. It's a better product, it's a better experience. There are loyalty advantages from your customers. There's loyalty advantages from your for your employees too, because if they feel that they're making a difference to their local community, they get more pride in the work they're doing, and your staff turnover is reduced. Gives you differentiation in a crowded marketplace. You have things to talk about. You don't need to compete on price. You get the market segments that you want to attract. You've got added relevance for particular products to your market, guilt-free holidays, and we all want better experiences. The arguments for this are overwhelming. So here we are back at the Pigs Peak Hotel. This is Coral Stevens Weaving and Tinsaba, the finishing of the products. The staff working in these places enjoy talking to visitors, and the visitors have a really great experience and, of course, purchase as they leave. Wonderful examples of roadside crafters here, and somebody else at Coral Stevens spinning wool to turn into tapestries. This doesn't work so well with people who are flying. You need to find a way of assuring people that their sisal mats will be delivered. It's a great example of something really, it's really enjoyable to go and see something like that. And again, if it's done on the village life experiences that Rupesh sells, then they would earn some money from having the tourists come and visit. This just took my breath away. This is a wall hanging being done for an international designer, which will grace a very expensive apartment somewhere in the world. And we don't see this talked about enough in tourism, where someone who comes through on a holiday sees an economic opportunity for themselves, but one which also benefits the local community, and that's exactly what happened here. I got these figures from the hotel records. I've taken out the names of the particular businesses who benefited because I think that is a matter between them and the hotel. But I did just want to point out that that's a lot of money spent in one financial year in the local economy. And you can see it ranges over vegetables, upholstery, hardware, tailoring, general supplies, fuel, furniture, honey and fruits. The one that may surprise you most is the money spent out on accommodation. But of course, when the hotel is full, the guests have to be recommended to go somewhere. And that is money that the hotel has taken in on behalf of other people and other accommodation, and people have gone off to stay there. On the right, you can see the number of staff employed. And you can see that in 2023, it went from 63 permanent employees up to 70 by the end of the financial year. Number of casual employees slightly reduced, but more people in permanent employment. In 2024, it's gone up to 70 permanently employed and 30 casual, so that's over 100. It's up to 100 employees now at the end of the financial year 2024. We set up the ICRT Southern Africa Network. That's an opportunity for people to share ideas and knowledge about how to do things. I've talked about the relationship with Adam Abbar on the right there and Rupesh Kumar in India. This is the ITRC Southern Africa is part of a much broader group of ICRTs, and we're encouraging interaction between people with universities, with South-South Exchange, and running regional responsible tourism awards, and of course running one-day conferences, 1 and 2 day conferences like this one at Pigs Peak, which was held in April. It's about learning from experience and sharing experience. We'll make progress faster if we share knowledge about what works and importantly about what doesn't work. There's no point in us all repeating the mistakes that others have made. Far better to learn from experience and build on the experience of the best.